LGBT representation in film has come a long way, especially in the last decade or so. It's far from perfect, but the presence of queer characters is a much more frequent and much more positive occurrence than even just about a decade ago. Yet, despite its relative rise in popularity, there's still one LGBT group that fails to get any sort of significant representation in film. I'm talking, of course, about asexuals. Also, trans and non-binary people. And basically anyone who isn't just bog standard gay or lesbian. But I already got the bisexual flag up, so I guess we'll talk about that. First, I want to be clear, throughout this video I will be using the term bisexual as a catch-all for attraction to more than one gender. So bisexuals, pansexuals, polysexuals, the whole lot. I feel like there's two big reasons for the lack of BT+ representation in film. The first is just, the straights don't get it. Gay makes sense, it's just being straight, but the opposite. But liking two things at once? Or liking neither thing? Whoa, mama. And the amount of times they make trans people serial killers really requires its own video analysis. The other reason is just the Hollywood formula. More than one love interest is too hard for writers to keep up with. Unless a love triangle is the central plot of your movie, it will almost always be resolved without anyone making tough decisions. One of them will be evil, or die, or be related, and with only one love interest, it's pretty rare for someone to explicitly state their sexuality. If you're dating someone of the same sex, you're gay. Opposite sex, you're straight. If you have no love interest, you're still straight somehow. Technically, there are lots of characters who could be bisexual or asexual, but they just never say it. This is probably part of the reason you're much more likely to see bisexuals on TV than in movies. There's just more time for sexual identities to be explored, and they don't have to pander to China. Did I say that part out loud? Although TV writers have a pretty bad habit of making a character openly bi and then giving them exclusively same-sex relationships. Just so you don't forget, they are definitely bi. And also they are almost exclusively female characters. And when films do depict bisexuals, it's, well, not bad, but questionable. The type of thing that makes you go, is this good bisexual representation? Bisexual women in film are usually depicted one of two ways. A quirky phase they went through, and slutty sluts who slutted up with everyone. And I probably don't have to tell you, neither of those are great. Of course, I have no problem with slutty bisexuals, that would be massively hypocritical of me. But there is a huge difference between a woman in real life personally deciding she wants to have a bunch of sex, regardless of gender, and a straight man deciding he wants the main character of his movie to be a hot chick who's down for a threesome. This is fetishization, and it perpetuates a pretty negative stereotype about bisexual people. And I would say, by and large, this is bad bisexual representation. But I mean, take Atomic Blonde, right? Sure, there's some pretty overt sexualization going on, but she's also a competent, badass woman. There are worse things to be portrayed as, right? Is it good? Is it bad? It's questionable. On the other hand, you have the quirky wild child. I'm not like the other girls, I fucked a woman once. Characters like Ramona from Scott Pilgrim with a female ex, which she admits was just because she was bi-curious. Or Summer from 500 Days of Summer, who says one of the few people she's dated was a woman. Now, she never really says that was a phase, but it's one throwaway line that's kinda played as a joke. She spends the entire film with men. You could maybe even slip Alyssa from Chasing Amy in here as sort of the inverse, a lesbian who experiments with a man. But frankly, I would like to spend as little time as possible analyzing queer representation in Kevin Smith movies.
Ew, dude, you were really gonna suck my dick.
Of the two, this is probably preferable, but it's still a bit of a stereotype. Sure, these movies don't outwardly say every bisexual is just going through a phase, but when it's the main way bisexuality is depicted, it leaves a pretty clear impression. It also sort of makes it seem like there's something inherently quirky or strange about someone experimenting with their sexuality, and there's something similar to the first thing going on. It's not fetishization, but like wanting to date-ization. Like, guys want a girl who's a little freaky and a little out there, and if she's fucked around with women, she's gotta be a little strange, right? We've given the manic pixie dream girl an ex-girlfriend. But you know, some girls do question their sexuality, experiment a little, and decide they're straight. And they're not wrong for doing so surely they can get a little representation too. And again, it's better than being an overly sexual slut for the bemusement of straight men, so is this good bisexual representation? Unlike women, male bisexual characters tend to only come in one flavor. Weird. Okay, haha, Matt's one of them. But I mean like, bad weird. I mean like Ian McShane in Sexy Beast, who's an absolute madman and the head of a criminal organization. He does drugs and goes to big fancy orgies. And as much as I may want that, that is not representative of bisexual men at large. There's Shane, the villain of Malibu Express, who blackmails his rich employer's daughter and son with photos of them fucking. Dennis Hopper's character from Blue Velvet is bisexual.
Elaborate on that.
No. Of course, there's the 1996 film Crash, no, not the racism one, the David Cronenberg one, about main character James meeting a strange fetishist and borderline cult leader Vaughn. Both have sex with multiple women throughout the film, but also end up fucking each other. And they get off on car wrecks. That's the fetish. I could almost make a case for a trope here. The surrealist bisexual movie. A film with such bizarre sexual openness, bisexuality becomes the norm. I could easily put Beyond the Valley of the Dolls here, as well as most of the characters in the film Short Bus. But I'm hard-pressed to think of many examples outside the works of one of the weirdest bisexuals to ever live, Rainier Werner Fassbender. Fassbender fucked men, married women, did absurd amounts of drugs, made 41 movies in 13 years, and died of a drug overdose in his 30s. My hero. His films, despite mostly being made in the 70s, feature gay and bisexual characters just existing without anyone commenting on it. Notably, his film Querelle features characters who are actively pursuing women, but are just totally okay with fucking men as well. That's the surrealist bisexual trope. Movies where everyone's just trying to fuck, to the point that same-sex encounters don't even seem out of place. And of course there's Josh Brolin's popular bisexual character, Thanos.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
I mean Tony from Flirting with Disaster, that extremely popular movie. Tony isn't even a major character. He shows up about halfway through the film, and it kind of seems like they just wanted to do a shocking bit where you find out the two men who were arguing are actually married, but still wanted him to be a threat to the main character's relationship. This is better than the above examples. He is unambiguously bisexual, he uses the word himself, but of course, there's a catch. He has an armpit fetish, which, to be clear, nothing wrong with that. It just sort of perpetuates this idea that bisexual men are excessively sexually deviant. Fine, you can call that one hypocrisy. On the other hand, he's a cop, and there is something wrong with that. Bohemian Rhapsody, I think, did an okay job dealing with Freddie Mercury's bisexuality. I mean, they at least had him say he was bisexual and did a decent job covering he and Mary Austin's complicated relationship. But it is sort of a low bar to acknowledge that easily the most famously bisexual person in recent history was bisexual and never really moved beyond acknowledgement. And also they cut it out for foreign markets. Way to take a stand, Hollywood. Really, the height of male bisexual representation, hell, probably all bisexual representation in film, is 1972's Cabaret. You guys seriously have yet to outdo musical theater from the 70s. In the film, Max von Hoyn has a relationship with both Sally, the female lead, and Brian, the male lead. This isn't treated as weird or deviant or even all that out of the ordinary. They do sort of pull the old, is he bisexual or just gay with Brian, and even suggest Sally might be bisexual as well. But Max is firmly and clearly bisexual. There's even a fun little song about three-ways with some other characters, so it's really bis all the way down on this one. But then, of course, there's Cabaret's evil twin, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, where the overtly queer, man and woman-loving Dr. Frankenfurter is a murderous, cross-dressing alien mad scientist. I'll allow it. And now a look at all of the non-binary bisexual characters. So we've looked at all these examples, and we still haven't really answered the question, is this good bisexual representation? And some of them clearly aren't, but others... Well, here's my take. Is this good or bad representation? Well, bi men with strange fetishes and women experimenting with their sexuality are real and valid and deserve their representation. On their own, most of these aren't bad representation at all. No, the bad thing about these is, for the most part, there are only representation. If there were plenty of solid bisexual characters and these instances popped up every now and again, sure, these work, but that's not reality. Duke of Burgundy is a 2014 film about a rich woman and her entomologist wife. Their wealth allows them to spend a lot of time engaged in sub-dom sexual roleplay. But it's not a sexy movie. It's not just lesbian 50 Shades of Grey. It's a genuine story about a real relationship and sexual boundaries between people. It's not bad representation, not at all. But the heavy lean on sub-dom situations means it's understandable that this wouldn't be representative of the lesbian community at large. But lesbians still have this movie, and this movie, and this movie, and this movie, and maybe this movie, and definitely this movie. And I'm not even saying there's an abundance of lesbian depictions. Nor am I saying that there aren't lots of bad lesbian depictions. But there's variety. Imagine if it was just Duke of Burgundy over and over again. You'd sort of get the impression people only thought of lesbians in those terms. The problem isn't these movies. The problem is a complete lack of normal, positive, and unambiguous bisexual representation to balance them out. When the best we've got is a musical from the 70s, well, that's not great bi representation. And look, I'm down to keep watching Cabaret forever, but my fellow bisexuals deserve better than that. More bisexual representation in film is not an unreasonable request. And while we're at it, more asexual representation, more transgender representation, and not just serial killers. I guess until that day comes, we always have headcanon bis. And so, a salute to you, Li Shang, the cast of Thor Ragnarok, and of course, Rockula. Except I think that's just me. I think I'm the only one that headcanons that.
We switch partners daily to play as we please.
Twosy beats onesie.
But nothing beats threes. I sleep in the middle.
I'm left and I'm right.
But there's room on the bottom if you drop in the night. I'm the only man, yeah.
I'll fuck anything that moves!
Is it pink on top or blue on top? I think it goes both ways.